Welcome to online worship at Countryside Unitarian Universalist.
Good morning. Let us call ourselves to worship. Let us call ourselves to worship as life calls to life, as hearts call to hope. Even in bleak times, as spring summons the green and flowering world into the sunlight once again. Let us remember all the beauty that waits, hidden in our hearts and minds and the earth, and all the beauty and goodness that emerges even in these days and that will continue to emerge, to blossom and unfold in the days and years before us.
We light this chalice, symbol of the spark of life, symbol of the dance and movement of our lives, symbol of our living tradition. Even apart, we see the miracle in one another's unrepeatable beauty. Even apart, we know the strength and endurance of the covenant and love between us.
Thank you, Jackson. I'm lighting a candle along with our chalice in honor of all of those whom we have lost to the pandemic, not only here, but around the world. May we find cures and vaccines soon. May our healthcare workers and essential workers remain healthy and receive the greatest support, and our hospitals and health centers the best equipment. May our healthcare system make room for every suffering person and provide equal care to all. And may we pass through this hard time stronger, wiser, and together. So may it be. Let us join in the words of our covenant, which I'll recite here and you can say at home. We unite to strengthen the bonds of kinship among all persons, to promote human dignity and to increase reverence for life's creating, sustaining, and transforming power through worship, study, and service. Welcome.
The reading is chapter 16 of Mark. When the Sabbath was over, Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of James, and Salome brought spices so that they might go and anoint him. And very early on the first day of the week, when the sun had risen, they went to the tomb. They had been saying to one another, "Who will roll away the stone for us from the entrance to the tomb?" When they looked up, they saw that the stone, which was very large, had already been rolled back. As they entered the tomb, they saw a young man dressed in a white robe sitting on the right side, and they were alarmed. But he said to them, "Do not be alarmed. You are looking for Jesus of Nazareth, who was crucified. He has been raised. He is not here. Look, there is the place they laid him. But go tell his disciples and Peter that he is going ahead of you to Galilee. There you will see him, just as he told you." So they went out and fled from the tomb, for terror and amazement had seized them. And they said nothing to anyone, for they were afraid.
Love and
James Allen said, "A mystery, once recognized, is something we are never finished with. It is never exhausting. Instead, we return to it again and again, and it unfolds new levels to us. Mysteries to be known must be entered into. We do not solve the mysteries, we enter into them. The deeper we enter into them, the more illumination we get. Still greater depths are revealed to us the further we go. Let us move ever deeper into the mystery which is within us, our hearts, our lives, our community, our never-ending Easters."
Scripture tells us that the Garden of Gethsemane, where stands to this day an ancient grove of olive trees, was a contemplative retreat for Jesus when he was in prayer. It was also a place where Jesus was known to gather his disciples, as he did the night of his arrest prior to his execution. As many have told the tale, when Jesus was at Gethsemane, he had a faithful young rabbit friend who often passed the time with him there. The gospel tells us that after Jesus' death on the cross, his disciples wrapped his body and carried it to a tomb in the earth and set a great boulder in front of it. Legend has it that as they prepared to go, the little rabbit hopped onto their path and tried to stop them, reminding them that Jesus had promised he would rise again to new life. The disciples could not hear the little friend, and they went on their way. The rabbit then returned to Gethsemane without them to await the return of his great friend. At dawn on Easter morning, it is said that Jesus returned to the garden and was welcomed by the loyal rabbit. Jesus smiled at his friend and blessed him, saying, "Though you are small, your faith is great." And then Jesus showed the little rabbit a beautiful blue larkspur flower growing there in the garden. "This flower," he said, "will always bear your image in honor of your faithful love." That night, when the disciples arrived at the garden to pray, still unaware of their resurrection, they discovered a clump of beautiful larkspurs, each blossom reflecting the image of the rabbit at its center, as a remembrance of the little creature's faith. And to this day, the larkspur flower reminds us that loving remembrance, even by the smallest of friends, can inspire faith, hope, and trust in all who may witness it.
This reading is from Dorothy Soleil, When He Came. I don't, as they put it, believe in God, but to him I cannot say no, hard as I try. Take a look at him in the garden, when his friends ran out on him, his face wet with fear, and with the spit of his enemies. Him I have to believe. Him I can't bear to abandon, to the great disregard for life, to the monotonous passing of millions of years, to the moronic rhythm of work, leisure, and work, to the boredom we fail to dispel, in cars, in beds, in stores. Him I have to believe. The way one believes another's laughter, his tears, or marriage, or no for an answer. That's how you'll learn to believe him about life promised to all.
Welcome to Countryside Church Unitarian Universalist Easter service. Many voices, many ways of seeing this same day. And Mark's original version of the Easter story simply and abruptly ends as the women leave the empty tomb in fear or overpowering awe, more like it. And they went out quickly and fled from the sepulchre, for they trembled and were amazed. Neither said they anything to any man, for they were afraid. So maybe they spoke with other women. But clearly they spoke with someone. Mark's is the earliest and I would say most accurate of the Gospels. But they must have told someone, and the unspoken essential implication is that the women overcame their shock at the empty tomb and became the bearers of good news. Did Jesus really rise? Did he ever really live or die? For some, to prove or disprove these things is a critical challenge, but not for me. And I hope not for most of us. What is incontrovertible is that a message arose in the first century of the Common Era, bearing throughout the centuries his name. A message of love and of hope. Now, Rabbi Hillel came to Palestine from Babylonia, and he taught in Jerusalem. He was born around 62 before the Common Era, and he founded a branch of Jewish practice that welcomed Gentiles, taught of good works, kindness, and justice. In an era where everyone was scrabbling to survive, this message caught hold. But it also spread in debate with another rabbi, Shammai, much more fundamentalist, dogmatic, whose followers took control of the temple in Jerusalem after the death of Hillel in around the year 20 of the Common Era. But the teachings of Hillel remained alive, and they circulated particularly among those who were oppressed in the Roman occupation and refused to collaborate. It's unlikely that Jesus of Nazareth, even as a boy, studied with Rabbi Hillel, but the teachings of his school would have been part of the atmosphere of study and debate in which Jesus, the young Jew, grew. And Jesus, raised under some of the cruelest times of Roman rule, chafed under that oppression. And he would have longed for a world more reflected in the kindness and justice envisioned by Rabbi Hillel. In fact, some of Jesus' sayings run in close parallel to those of Hillel. But Jesus had a hunger for justice that would not be satisfied in debate and discussion, a spirit of liberation that would not be put aside, and a fire in him that would not be hidden. He taught, as all rabbis taught, in parables that one needed smart spiritual ears to hear, and he performed acts of inclusiveness and defiance that required spiritual eyes to see. He was dramatic, effective, welcoming, passionate, and those with brave hearts and curious minds were transformed by his message. Many of his most devoted followers were women. Women eager to leave behind the rules and roles and expectations of family life and to find new family and new life with the other followers of this new great teacher. It was an anxious time, a time of oppression and struggle and little hope. But into this time, Jesus came with an unapologetic message of resistance and hope. He asked his followers to disregard the oppressive world they saw, to think outside the limitations they were being taught and given, whether they were the limitations set by the rabbis of the great temple or the Romans who carried the force of an empire behind them. He had a vision of a kingdom of the just and good. He had a vision of a feast of plenty for all. And he had a vision of a world in which people were not crushed and exploited for the wealth and comfort of others. He exhorted his followers not to worship him, but to see what they loved in him in every person, particularly in the poorest, the humblest, the sickest, in the least powerful, in the marginalized. He urged his followers to be those who would create this finer world, this kingdom, which some these days call kingdom, adding a sense of greater equality among human beings and even between human beings and the other animals of the earth, in a way I believe Jesus would have approved. I think if he were here now, he would have said, let us create that kingdom together. And he traveled and taught. And as he did so, small communities sprang up and found hope in one another. They were in covenant together, even as we are, promising to care for the weakest, the hungriest, those in prison, those who were ill, promising a mutual care that defied the fearful self-interest of the times, self-interest that might look a little familiar in our days. Early commentators found these groups unnervingly charitable. They didn't fit in. You might say they were not conformed to this world, the world of power and status and wealth. Among them were women wealthy and independent, men willing to give away power and privilege, young girls eager to learn how to be wise and kind and merciful rather than how to get the latest length of Roman cloth or the best marriage. They didn't conform, and they would not support Caesar, right or wrong. They tended the lowliest home more eagerly than the mightiest shrine to Caesar. They were like lambs or doves, and in the first enthusiastic waves, they may have felt as immortal and unstoppable as flower children placing daisies in the barrels of guns of the National Guard. It was a struggle then, but they had one another, and they had this brilliant and bold teacher. This teacher who would not just talk the talk, but who walked the walk, defying the Romans and their fundamentalist toadies as well. Riding into Jerusalem, bold as you please. He called the question. And then they suffered a stunning blow. And in the face of it, all hope seemed for a moment dead. They were reeling at his death, despairing. And then they discovered passion for all they had grown and learned and built together. What they thought had been destroyed lived in them, could live forever if they could simply overcome their terrible fear, go forth and share the good news. They had a sudden, direct, genuine, miraculous experience of resurrection. The word was made real among them again. The small movement had shared a communion of the truth. While though the tempest loudly roars, I hear the truth, it liveth, and though the darkness round me close, songs in the night it giveth. That's the Easter story. Of course, it takes place not only at Easter, but in countless human resurrections. The power of the Easter story is that it reminds us of this reality of resurrection in this world that carries echoes of that first century. The Easter story is about one whose commitment to his message of love and freedom was so great, he was willing to die rather than deny it, willing to have his disciples put away their weapons rather than defend him with violence. He was willing to die, but not to kill. As it says in the Gospel of John, what has come to being in him was life, and the life was the light of all people. And the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not overcome it. So may it be that the darkness does not overcome the light. It is no wonder that this resurrection story has been a source of inspiration for generations of people, of saviors, modest and monumental.
We need the message of Easter this year. The tomb is very much with us just now. The specter of death hovering near at hand. As we watch the corona tolls rise, if we do not today know one of the fallen, we fear this may yet come. Some of us, especially if we are unwell or solitary, may feel entombed even in our homes. I have been meditating lately on the fact that our house dust is always quite matter-of-factly the life we have already shed. Our used hair and skin cells and fingernail parings, foretelling what is to come. Dust to dust. You might think this a macabre frame of mind, but it isn't really. Just conservation of matter and energy. Everything we are now is made up only of everything that ever has been, and will only become everything that ever will be. The web of existence is interconnected throughout time as well as space. On our home altar, I keep a ginger jar of earth. It is from my grandmother's garden in San Diego, which was turned and sifted in her hands, and in my mother's, and my father's, and my brother's, and my own. And so our shed skin cells have mingled with it. My mother's and father's ashes were scattered there. Because my parents have no gravesite, I have carried this ginger jar with me from place to place. Earth from it has mingled with that of the garden of each home where I have lived, each church where I have passed time as a member or staffer. I have thrown it in with the fire ash after defending my dissertation and burning it. I have rubbed it over my third eye on Ash Wednesday. I have sprinkled it in the potted philodendron that was my mother's before she died, and which lives with us still. Here is the thing. The tomb of Easter is the earth that awaits us all. Indeed, it is always with us. The ancestors are always with us. Jesus taught about divine love, the love each of us has for one another, and the ongoing story of love that binds us together with everyone who is, or ever has been, or ever will be loved. This is the conservation of love. This is love eternal. What springs forth from the tomb at Easter is this complicated, grieving, messy, eternal love. May we see it in the daffodils. May we find it in one another's faces on Zoom. May we understand that it is always with us, present in every moment, wherever the road may take us or not take us.
Now the green blade riseth from the buried grain, wheat that in dark earth many days has lain. Love lives again, that with the dead has been. Love is come again, like wheat that springeth green. In the grave they laid him, love by hatred slain, thinking that never he would wake again. Laid in the earth like grain that sleeps unseen. Love is come again, like wheat that springeth green.
We live on a planet of resurrections, daily, moment by moment, personal, planetary, historic, small, and dramatic. It's no wonder that this resurrection story has been a source of inspiration for millennia. Mohandas Gandhi freely admitted two sources of inspiration: Henry David Thoreau's writings on civil disobedience and the nonviolence teachings of Jesus of Nazareth. In the spirit of those teachings, Gandhi was able to free a country not by force of his own character, but because, you might say, the word was made flesh in every person who joined with him. Because of this, there was a much larger resurrection in all of India, coming back to life as a country with self-determination. Because Gandhi arose in such a loving victory, the idea spread with stronger life than ever. The Cistercian monk Thomas Merton, whose writings awoke a generation, echoed this sense of loving victory in these words: "Love is the seed of life in my own heart while it seeks the good of another." And Anglican Archbishop Desmond Tutu said, "I don't preach a social gospel, I preach the gospel, period. The gospel of our Lord Jesus Christ is concerned for the whole person. When people were hungry, Jesus didn't say, 'Now is that political or social?' He said, 'I feed you.' Because the good news to a hungry person is bread." So said the Archbishop. Some years ago, I had a chance to meet Father John Deere, a Jesuit priest, a friend and co-agitator with Philip and Daniel Berrigan, the radical priests who were repeatedly arrested for their nonviolent protests against nuclear proliferation and other evils. It was John Deere who told me about the Fellowship of Reconciliation's witness program in the Middle East. And because of him, I traveled to Israel and Palestine, hoping to serve peace and out of a yearning that the region find rebirth in peace and reconciliation. Now, that peace has not come to pass yet, but miracles have been reported in that region before. Anyway, the heart of that trip was a short time that we spent with a man named Daoud Nassar at the Tent of Nations. It's a farm that the Palestinian Nassar family has owned for 104 years. It sits just outside Bethlehem, in the middle of a ring of Israeli settlements. The settlers have electricity and roads, schools, shops, crops, clinics, and easy access to water. The farm was closed off from the main access road by giant cement blocks moved in with Caterpillar machinery to block the road by settlers. So you park outside and walk up. Children go to this farm during the summer to learn about growing things and about nonviolence. People, like me, come from around the world to help harvest olives, plant trees, and build respectful relationships. Mosaics of Mary, Joseph, the baby Jesus, the wise men adorn the rough buildings. We knew while we were there that Israeli settlers would attack sometimes, usually in the night, sometimes vandalizing or stealing an animal, once or twice setting fire to buildings. In the tent under 15 blankets in a November night, I thought about the risk. As I laid there, a fanatic could come in through the side of our tent. Should I stay up worrying about it? I reflected if something happened to me or another of our group, it might bring attention to that area that so cries out to be seen, to be heard, that cries out for peace and for justice. It might bring attention, it might not. Thomas Merton wrote, "Do not depend on the hope of results. You may have to face the fact that your work will be apparently worthless and even achieve no result, if not perhaps results opposite to what you expect. As you get used to this idea, you start more and more to concentrate not on the results, but on the rightness, the truth of the work itself. So I considered, as I was laying there under the 15 blankets, that I was comfortable with whatever the outcome might be. And that recognition in the hills outside Bethlehem was a sure and certain experience of the hope of resurrection of life, beyond life, within life, more than life, not in a heaven apart from the earth, but rising from my own sense of meaning. And I felt peace and hope and happiness, and I buried myself beneath the covers and slept peacefully through until morning. Resurrection is our ability to rise and rise again for the good. In this way, even for a Unitarian Universalist, Jewish humanist like myself, Jesus lives. Some years ago, right around Easter, I opened an email from Daoud Nassar, then the head of the family, and he wrote, "Dear friends, I wish you all a happy Easter, a wonderful holiday. Always when we face difficulties and sufferings, we stop on our way. We cannot continue. For Jesus Christ, the cross was not the end. It was the power and the victory against the darkness of this world. I pray that the light and the power of resurrection will accompany us all on our journey in this world." And it does. The work of the Tent of Nations, years later, continues to this day. The hope for a dramatic peace is as yet unfulfilled, but the making of understanding and peace continues, person by person, group by group. The teachings of Jesus live there in this Christian Palestinian farmer on his Palestinian farm. The teachings of Jesus live there as though he walks still among all who come there. That Easter story told of a time so long ago, told of an indestructible life, of hope, of despair healed, of lives given meaning and purpose. And it's a story that tells itself daily. We need to remember that. We need to remember and notice the emergences of hope. Hope isn't a guarantee of success or of positive outcomes. It's a force that brings us strength and the capacity of heart to move forward. There is what Carol Patton, a member of this congregation in a recent conversation, called a physiology of hope. It makes changes in our bodies and hearts. It really does. But the story of the life and work of Jesus of Nazareth is one that has created a world-changing hope, first in the hearts and lives of his early followers, and even today in the hearts and lives of people who pay attention to his teachings and not to the vile rantings of greedy clerics or politicians. Against all odds, against the powers of churches and the powers of history, the teaching lives. And when people listen with the eyes and see, listen with the ears and see with the eyes of the heart, they discover a powerful hope that, just as centuries earlier, rolls the stones back from hearts and leads the way to new life. Sometimes the teachings of peace, justice, compassion, generosity come in Jesus' name. Sometimes they arise from sources around the world and are expressed in acts simple and daily, dramatic and exceptional, courageous and ordinary. We need an Easter hope now, of wisdom born in spite of and out of suffering, of justice born where injustice has ruled, of audacious resistance to oppression, and of indestructible goodness. As Unitarian Universalists, we know there is no sealed book, no finished story, and therefore we know that hope is not lost as long as we remember the power of new life that lives in each one of us. The power that Jesus demonstrated with his life still teaches today. Just as in his time there were Romans and Shemaites and collaborators with oppressors, just as he struggled to proclaim words of unity, liberation, and hope, so it is in our time. And if one good man 2,000 years ago could prove such a real resurrection, so can we. My friends, there is hope, great hope, because we are here in this moment. We may be sheltering in place, but there is no stone covering our hearts and lives. We have countless voices, diverse powers, and a spirit that cannot die. Christians might say we are the body of Christ. We might say we are the body of hope, of life, of justice, of compassion. We are the body of love, and we live. We live. Amen.
This reading, Christ Has No Body, is by the 16th century mystic Teresa of Avila. Christ has no body but yours, no hands, no feet on earth but yours. Yours are the eyes with which he looks, compassion on this world. Yours are the feet with which he walks to do good. Yours are the hands with which he blesses all the world. Yours are the hands, yours are the feet, yours are the eyes, you are his body. Christ has no body now but yours, no hands, no feet on earth but yours. Yours are the eyes with which he looks compassion on this world. Christ has no body now on earth but yours.
Called to become. From Edwina Gatley, there was no path, so I trod one. You are called to become a perfect creation. No one is called to become who you are called to be. It does not matter how short or tall, or thick-set or slow you may be. It does not matter whether you sparkle with life, or as still as a still pool. Whether you sing your song aloud or weep alone in darkness. It does not matter whether you feel loved and admired or unloved and alone, for you are called to become a perfect creation. No one's shadow should cloud your becoming. No one's light should dispel your spark. Unique and loved, you stand. Beautiful or stunted in your growth, but never without hope in life, for you are called to become a perfect creation. This becoming may be gentle or harsh, subtle or violent, but it never ceases, never pauses or hesitates, only is. Creative force, calling you to become a perfect creation.
So wrote the poet. And it reminds me what you are called to be is perfectly your finest self, not to aspire after perfection in the sense of being crushed under perfectionism, but to become your finest self. In my own theology, everything doesn't happen for a reason, but we make reasons and meanings for all that happens. We make our perfections. We make our aspirations. We make our perfect selves. And it reminds me of a song of profound meaning to me and to many other people, a song from La Cage aux Folles. I am what I am. I am my own special creation. So come take a look. Give me the hook or the ovation. It's my world that I want to take a little pride in. It's my world, and it's not a place I have to hide in. Life's not worth a damn till you can say, hey world, I am what I am. There's one life, there's no return and no deposit. One life, so it's time to open up your closet. Life's not worth a damn till you can say, hey world, I am what I am. I am was what in the story of the garden, God called God's self. So let us be I am. Let us be bearers of life. Let us be bearers of authenticity and courage and of constant and never-ending resurrections. Let's have a time of mindfulness, intention, or prayer, not addressed to a distant being, but to the being that is within us, between us, around us. This is the legacy of liberation that lived in the teaching of Jesus of Nazareth, who was who he was, without apology or security. This is our endless rising and living, our never-ending Easters. Let us take time in silence. Summon your heart to life. Summon your heart open and awake. Roll away the obstructions. Roll away the clouds. Open your heart to life and to hope, because you are hope, and you are light, and you are life. For so it is. Amen. Each week, we do take up an offering. Even though we are meeting virtually, we are truly meeting. We are meeting in so many ways throughout the week to keep the work of this congregation and this faith going strong in this world. You'll see information on your screen about how to give. Well, it's good to hear the choir again. For all that you give to this congregation, we give thanks, and we are blessed. I'd like to close in two ways. One is to remind you that even though we extinguish the light of our chalice, we recognize that the real light is in every one of you, waiting to be kept not under a bushel, but revealed in the world. And that it is important to seek that light in every person and all living things as you go into the world. So I'd like to invite you to take hands in the way that we have been taking hands at the end of our services since we've been online, by taking your palms and pointing them outward so that our hands on our screens are meeting here in a safe way until the time that we will meet again in person. And you can repeat these words. I take your hand in mine so that we might accomplish together what we cannot accomplish alone. Blessed be. And I leave you with these other words, the words from the Gospel of John. These things I have spoken unto you, that my joy might remain in you, and that your joy might be full. May our joy be full. May we be joyful. Amen.